Many years ago, in a small village nestled at the foot of the Grand Catskill Mountains, there lived a kind but idle man named Rip Van Winkle. He was a good-natured fellow, beloved by the children of the village and respected by his neighbors for his gentle manners, though they often shook their heads at his lack of ambition. Rip was always ready to lend a helping hand to anyone in need, whether it was mending a fence, fetching water, or running errands for the womenfolk. Yet when it came to his own work, he was astonishingly lazy. His farm was small, his field full of weeds, and his fences forever in disrepair. His sheep wandered away, his cow gave little milk, and his harvest was meager year after year. Rip's good-natured heart was his greatest virtue and his greatest flaw. His wife, Dame Van Winkle, was a sharp-tongued woman who never missed a chance to scold him for his idleness. Her voice echoed through the house from morning till night, filling poor Rip's ears with complaints about his laziness, his neglected farm, and his habit of wasting time with his idle friends. Rip bore it all with patient resignation. When the scolding became too much, he would shrug his shoulders, grab his old fowling piece, whistle to his faithful dog Wolf, and wander off into the woods to escape his wife's nagging tongue. The children of the village adored Rip because he was always ready to play with them. He told them stories, flew kites, made them toys, and taught them to shoot with bows and arrows. He would mend their broken sleds and teach them to build little dams across the stream. The youngsters followed him about as if he were a Pied Piper, and his cheerful company made him welcome wherever he went. But Dame Van Winkle did not share the children's affection. She saw only her husband's laziness and the wasted hours he spent idling on a bench before the village inn, talking politics with old Nicholas Vedder and other equally unproductive men. There they sat day after day, puffing their long pipes, talking about distant wars, taxes, and the affairs of the colonies, while their farms fell to ruin. When Rip's wife would find him there, she would storm into the group, tongue lashing furiously, until Rip would rise meekly and slink away, followed by sympathetic laughter from his companions. One fine autumn day, Rip set out into the woods with his gun on his shoulder and his dog trotting by his side. The weather was perfect, the air crisp and clear, and the forest alive with the colors of fall, scarlet, gold, and amber leaves rustling beneath his feet. He climbed higher and higher into the mountains, stopping now and then to rest or admire the view. From one rocky ledge he looked down upon the peaceful valley below, with its winding river and the village nestled like a toy at the base of the hills. The sight filled him with peace and a quiet longing for freedom, from work, from scolding, from care. As the sun dipped lower, Rip realized he had wandered much farther than he intended. He paused beside a mountain brook, thinking to take a drink, when he heard his name called, Rip Van Winkle, Rip Van Winkle, in a voice that echoed strangely among the cliffs. Startled, he looked around but saw no one. Again came the call, and this time he saw a short, odd-looking old man climbing toward him, carrying a heavy keg on his shoulder. The man's dress was old-fashioned, a kind of antique Dutch outfit with a high, crowned hat and a long beard. Though small and strange, there was something dignified about him. Without a word, the man gestured to Rip to help him carry the keg. Rip, always ready to oblige, took the other end and followed the stranger up a narrow, rocky path. They climbed higher and higher until they reached a hollow surrounded by towering trees. There, to Rip's astonishment, was a group of men dressed just as oddly, playing a solemn game of ninepins. Their faces were bearded and grave, their movements deliberate, and their silence uncanny, The only sounds were the rolling of the balls that echoed like thunder among the mountains. The man who had brought Rip gestured for him to set down the keg, and the group began to pour from it into flagons, passing them around in silence. Rip's curiosity got the better of him, and he took a sip. The drink was strange, but delicious, cool, rich, and strong. He tried another sip, then another, until his head grew light. The sound of the balls rolling became distant, the figures blurred before his eyes, and at last, overcome by drowsiness, Rip sank to the ground and fell into a deep sleep. When Rip awoke, the sun was already high. The air was fresh and bright, and birds were chirping in the trees. He rubbed his eyes, stretched his limbs, and looked around for his strange companions. They were gone. The hollow was silent and empty, and even the keg had vanished. What a curious night, Rip muttered, scratching his head. Those fellows must have slipped away quietly. He called for his dog, Wolf, Wolf, but no familiar bark answered him. He whistled and searched, but the dog was nowhere to be found. He began to think his wife's scolding might not be so bad after all, if only he could find his way home. As he picked up his gun, he was astonished to find it rusted and worn, as if it had lain untouched for years. The stock was worm-eaten, and the barrel was coated with rust. Bewildered, he began his descent. The path seemed strange, overgrown, and rough. When he reached the edge of the village, nothing looked the same. The houses were different, new faces filled the streets, and even the air of the place felt unfamiliar. His heart began to pound as he looked for people he knew, but all were strangers. He limped to his own house and found it in ruins. The roof had caved in, the windows were broken, and weeds grew through the floorboards. Surely, he said, I haven't been gone that long. He hurried to the village inn, but even that was changed. The old sign that once bore the image of King George had been replaced with a picture of a man named General Washington. The very name of the inn was different. When Rip entered, a crowd of villagers looked up suspiciously. His long beard, now reaching his chest, his tattered clothes, and bewildered expression made him a strange sight indeed. "Who are you?" someone asked. "I am Rip Van Winkle," he replied faintly. "Can anyone tell me what has become of my friends?" "Rip Van Winkle," repeated several voices. "He's been gone 20 years. Where have you been?" Rip was speechless. 20 years? It couldn't be true. He felt his face and beard, and indeed, it was long and grey. He stammered questions about his wife, his children, the war that seemed to have changed everything. People told him that his wife had died some years ago, that his daughter Judith was now grown and married, and that the colonies were no longer under British rule. The American Revolution had come and gone while Rip slept. Rip's heart swelled with confusion and disbelief. He stumbled out into the street and asked after his old friends Nicholas Vedder, Derek Van Bummel, the schoolmaster, but most were dead or gone. He saw a young woman with a child in her arms, and something about her face stirred his memory. "My child," he cried, "do you not know me?" The woman, startled, looked at him closely. "My father was named Rip Van Winkle," she said hesitantly, "but he went away long ago, before I was married. They say he never came back." Tears filled Rip's eyes as he reached out to her. "I am your father, child," he said softly. "I've come back at last." The crowd murmured in amazement, and soon the truth of Rip's strange adventure spread through the village. The story of his 20-year sleep among the Catskill Mountains became the talk of the countryside. The old men shook their heads, wondering if it was witchcraft or a dream. The children gazed at Rip with wide-eyed wonder, and the women whispered about the mystery of it all. Rip settled down to live with his daughter, who took good care of him. He resumed his old, easy ways, wandering the village, chatting with the children and telling stories of the mysterious men of the mountains who played ninepins and drank enchanted liquor. The younger folk would gather around him to hear the tale, half believing and half doubting. Rip himself came to doubt parts of it. Sometimes he thought it had been a dream, but when he felt his long beard and remembered the years that had passed, he knew it must have been true. He often sat before the new inn, watching life in the changed world around him. The village had grown. People spoke of the Union, of elections, of presidents instead of kings. Rip would nod and puff his pipe, content to live quietly, free at last from Dame Van Winkle's scolding voice. Though he found the world changed beyond his understanding, his easy temper and simple heart kept him content. He became something of a village legend, the man who had slept through a revolution. Visitors who passed through the region often heard of the story and would seek him out, finding him sitting in his favorite spot with a small circle of listeners at his feet. With a twinkle in his eye, Rip would recount how he had wandered into the mountains, met strange old men dressed in the fashion of long ago, and drank from their mysterious keg before falling asleep. For 20 years. When he finished, he would stroke his beard thoughtfully and say, "There's a lesson in it, friends. The world may change while you sleep, but a good nap never hurts a man who's had too much care." As the years went by, Rip grew older and slower, but his story never lost its charm. The children who had once sat at his knee grew up and told it to their own children, and every time the thunder echoed among the Catskill Mountains, people would say it was the sound of the mysterious men playing their game of ninepins again. Some believed Rip's tale, others laughed it off as the fancy of an idle dreamer, but for those who loved him it didn't matter. Rip Van Winkle had become part of the valley's very spirit, a reminder of time's power and the strange ways of fate. And so Rip spent the rest of his days in peace, loved and respected, telling his story again and again to anyone who would listen. The village changed, generations passed, but the tale of Rip Van Winkle lived on, a gentle, wistful legend of a man who slept through time and awoke to a new world, unchanged in heart. Though everything around him had transformed, he became the living bridge between the past and the present, the dreamer who had slipped through the fingers of time, its